Hey, it's Ginger from the Copycat Quilter. Today, I am searching for low volume fabrics out of my stash. So I'm a really scrappy quilter and I'm attracted to bright colors. And whenever I start making my quilts, I end up usually with a boring white on white background, or maybe I get really wild and do a light gray. But today, I'm searching my stash to see if I can find some of those low volumes. Because as I'm making more and more quilts, I'm realizing those low volumes really set off your scrappiness. So let's go look in my stash. Of course, there's some obvious things you can do to get some low volumes into their stash. You can buy big fat quarter bundles like these, where these have lots of pretty low volume. These things are pretty pricey, and probably because there's not a lot of low volume kind of bundles out there. And I really struggle sometimes to figure out exactly what low volume means. So some of these that don't have an obvious pattern kind of show up as low volume. And then there's some that I would consider kind of iffy, but that's because my experience with them and my comfort level isn't up there yet. You can see some of them have very cream-like backgrounds, and then some are more white background. Actually, this entire bundle is pretty cream colored. But as far as these go, to me, they kind of come across dark to be a low volume. And this one, I feel like, has a lot of a strong pattern. I'm working on my comfort level and my understanding of what low volumes are and trying to expand that. So while that one was kind of a cream based, this one has more of a gray base. And again, I would have a hard time using those and calling those low volume. These have more of a blue base. And some gray. These, to me, are getting really dark to be considered low volume. And that one may be a little too blue. That one actually has a little sparkle shimmer in it, if you can see it on the camera. So I don't know that I would use that, because it could be distracting and draw attention to the background instead of really fading into it like a low volume. This has a big print. This is another fat quarter bundle that I bought. I've tried to cut down on my fabric. Buying. And this batch, whenever I just went a little insane on the low volume, I realized in my stash I have a lot of medium fabrics, and I have a pretty significant amount that would be medium dark, maybe dark. And whenever I tended to quilt with those, I keep finding myself using a white on white as a background, or maybe a solid light gray, but I really struggle. I don't want all my quilts to have a white background. So I bought a couple of fat quarter bundles. This one is more in the tans and yellows, and other than a few that are a little bit dark for me that I would probably find a challenge, most of these are very mottled, abstract, and are light colored. Now those are the tans, and then there's actually a few in here that are kind of yellows or greenish colors. And green's kind of hard to show on videos, so you may not be able to see so much that one's really got a green tint. So these would be good to mix in, and I think I could probably use all of those maybe struggle a little with those two. And this one is a solid. I also find it kind of hard to throw solids into the mix with low volumes. I can either use solids or prints, but I have struggled a little, so I'm trying to expand there and open my mind a little more to mixing some of those solids and prints together. And for a pieced background where I'm not using just one fabric, they would probably be fine. So here's one that's obviously darker than those other ones that I've been looking at. But I did want to check the back of this one and see what it would look like if I used the opposite side of the fabric. There's a YouTuber I love to watch, and English is not her first language, and she'll say the right and the left side of the fabric. And I love that. I'm not making fun of her. I think it's great whenever people are smarter than me and can learn more than one language. But I do like this. Like, this is a very different low volume look from that side. And so I would probably use this one with the other side of the fabric and not necessarily feel I had to stick to the front side or the right side. I do have some, I found these kind of in the baby print area. This one's got little sheep on it, I guess. And this would make a good one. It's got a little more of a pattern maybe than I would want, but you know, if it's cut into a background square and it's laid up beside other fabrics, I don't think it's going to show up necessarily as a print. And the colors are light enough and low enough contrast that it still could pass as a low volume. I guess maybe that's part of the definition of low volume, is that it has low contrast. It doesn't have extreme contrast in it so that it shows as a print so much. I do have this, which is dark, to be considered low volume, I guess. If you used it with other pieces like this, or even if you use this as a background against a very dark or dark mediums, it would show up really nicely. And just for funsies, let's look at the back of it. So that would actually come across really nice as very low volume, not distracting if you used it in a quilt with grays. And one more bundle. I've really limited myself on fabric purchases this year, but I did buy, I think this is 3 or 4 bundles that I bought recently just to really kick into those scraps. And all the videos I've posted so far, I believe, all came from my scrap and stash, so I feel pretty good about that. Some of these have little distinct prints. That one's cute. It's got little pretzels, and I have a son who's a chef that would really enjoy that one. Little cats. So this one you can see has kind of a mix of the more yellowy, the more gray. Some with kind of the taupe color. Some with pinks. Oh, I like that. It has writing on it. Writing's always nice to have in the background. In fact, the back that I'm going to use for this quilt that I'm making next has a newsprint. That one's probably a little too color specific and too much of a pattern, but we'll see. Since I'm not very confident using low volumes yet, or even just mixed backgrounds, I wanted to show you something that I've learned on how to figure out which low volumes are really going to go with the prints that I've chosen. So I've chosen here something that's an obvious gray, something that's an obvious cream color background, something that's obviously blue, and then this orangey brown kind of color. So if I take some of the low volume prints I have, it becomes really quickly apparent this does not really go well with the grays. This could maybe go with the creams. Doesn't have a blue background in it, doesn't have that blue shade, but it kind of goes with this. You can see that kind of picks up the lighter color. So I would probably use this in more of a brown quilt, but less of a gray or blue quilt. Or a quilt, I would probably use that in a quilt that has more oranges and browns and maybe like rust red colors than I would for a quilt that say had pinks and blues. This one is more of a cream that quickly matches with the creams. Doesn't mean you couldn't use it with the browns. It doesn't mean you couldn't use it with the blues, but you can see it really blends nicely with those creams. And here's one of those green ones that I had that has a greenish tint. Not at all with the gray, in my opinion. It's not crazy with it with the cream. It could make kind of a nice contrast if I was using a quilt that had a lot of blues. And I really don't like it with that brown at all. So this one, unless I was making a quilt that had a lot of greens, I would struggle using this one. Here's kind of that same print that's in a yellow, and I kind of threw it in the spot that it goes. I think it could go over here with the browns too if you were really wanting to brighten it up, but I think it goes really nicely with this. It's got enough of the green that it kind of goes with the greens. But these are just sample fabrics. I'm not making a quilt that uses or highlights any one of these fabrics. So, whoops. Here's one of the ones that kind of has a pattern that I would struggle with. It does look okay with the grays. This is a lighter gray and it kind of blends too much, but if it was a quilt that had a lot of grays and blacks that were gray-based blacks, I think that could work. Absolutely not. Maybe, because there's enough of kind of a yellowy color in here that I think it could go with that. And it depends on all the different shades of the brown that you had. But if all of my browns were this reddish kind of brown, I would debate using this one. And I think it does go okay with the blue. This one has the blues and the kind of reddish brown cream color in it. So, you know, it might could go to either one of these. And especially if I was making a quilt that had blue and natural browns in it, then this would probably be a really nice choice. Here's the little blue dot that I said I would use either the front or the back of the fabric. The back of the fabric kind of goes nicely with the gray, and the blue's okay with it. This gray actually has a little bit of blue. Absolutely not with the cream, either direction. Blue, obviously it would go nice in a blue quilt, but I probably wouldn't use it one that's the reds and the browns and the rusts. Now, you've seen some of my other videos. My scrap quilts tend to be extremely scrappy, and I don't always go with the color palette, so some of these choices wouldn't really matter because my quilt's got every color under the sun in it anyway. So here's a white-based low volume. I'm not crazy about the pinks in it because to me it gives it a little bit too much of a pattern. But again, that's kind of my limited experience with low volumes. Once I get more experience with it, I may feel way more confident. And I really don't like this in reverse because it's too white. It doesn't have any kind of texture or anything that shows through. But this would be okay against a blue if I was really looking for a white background. Probably that's the only one I would put that with. So I'll show you one more. These are those ones that kind of have the taupey color and it has a creamish background. It's definitely not white. You can easily see this one's kind of got that taupey color, but you can see how much more creamy this one is than the white. So I don't think it would go good with gray. Iffy on whether it would go with the cream or not. I think it'd be okay with blue. Maybe the browns, depending on how red the browns were. So this one, I like it a lot. I would struggle using it in a quilt, but the other side of it actually is much more muted and that taupe color doesn't show up as much. So that could be an option if there's a quilt that would fit into. That kind of covers most of the ones I pulled out, and I'm going to have a mess to clean up after this video. This is that one that had the floral print that I thought might be a little hard to show, but especially with a cream background fabric, and especially if it was busy prints, that might come out just fine because it doesn't have enough of a print that it would really be distinct in a background of a lot of other busy prints with a cream background. So one of the places you might look in your stash and that are kind of easy to work out are batiks. So here I have a sneak peek at a quilt that I'm working on now that probably will end up in a video. And you can see I've used like a light blue, I'm not even sure if that's a batik or a blender maybe. But that's a great low volume that you can use because it's light enough, it's not patterned. This one kind of has like a modeling to it. So it fades into the background, but it's not just flat. You could use the back of that fabric. So here, this is the front side and that's the back side. Now some people call that the wrong side, but who says it's wrong to use that if it works in your quilt? So you might want to look at your lighter colored batiks or even those blender kind of fabrics that have some texture and aren't just flat. And that might be a good way to find some secret low volume in your stash. So I hope you got some good ideas today of how you might find low volumes in your stash as you go searching and not necessarily at the fabric store. Although I did show that I ended up purchasing some, but that's just because I had such a dearth of low volumes in my stash. And now I can use my stash more and not buy so much fabric until I run through that pile that I showed you earlier. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope that you like and that you subscribe, and maybe click the notify bell if that's your thing. But really put some comments below on maybe some places that you found good low volume fabrics, or if you struggle with low volume fabrics, let me know. Or even better, if you have some secrets that work really great for you, please share them, because I know it's something I struggle with and probably a lot of other people do. I'm Ginger with the Copycat Quilter, and I hope you come back for more videos.